This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Wednesday, January 15th, 2014, in St. Louis, Missouri, and Gloucester, Massachusetts. This Agile Life, Episode 32. Location, location, location. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Hello, everyone. I'm the host of This Agile Life, John Sextro. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Amos King.
Hey, John. Good evening.
Good evening, Amos. And Jason Tice.
Hi, John. Good to talk to you for Happy New Year, too, by the way.
Happy New Year, Jason. It's good to talk to you. Guys, tonight we have a special guest joining us. We have Karen Favaza Spencer. She is an Agile coach and the author of the Agile ABC book. And Jason.
Hi, guys.
Karen.
Hi, Karen. Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And Karen, I understand that you have the privilege of actually having met and known Jason Tice outside of the podcast.
Yes, I have. He and I connected April 2013 at the Agile Games Conference here in Boston.
So for those of you that don't know, Karen's a good colleague I have met. She's from Boston, and Karen knows where John, Amos, and myself are all from Missouri, and we're going to officially say the World Series and what happened is not on tonight's agenda. What happened last year, that's last year's news.
That's right.
But as Karen mentioned, I bumped into Karen. Actually, I believe it was at the first, kind of just the opening of the conference. We were just kind of talking about what we did. She mentioned she was an author. She actually had her book there. Which when I saw it, I immediately said, "Wow, the applications of this simple book." Because it takes Agile and makes it very simple to understand, and it actually has pictures. It's illustrated. The coaching options, the training options are limitless. So, Karen, I applaud what you've provided to the Agile community, and I'm really happy that you can join us this evening to talk about a little bit about the book, but also about your ideas and your thoughts about Agile in general.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. I'm thrilled to be here, and I so appreciate your feedback on the book. It's wonderful to hear the real life application, because sending out a book into the world is sort of like sending your child out into the world. You hope it does well.
And the only thing I could say is I did show the book to both my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old. The 4-year-old learned the book, and then a bad thing happened. She learned about Annie. So until we turn the book into a musical, I can't get her interest in it anymore.
Well, they have audiobooks now. Maybe that's an idea for my next book.
I think there's something we can roll with that. But
you can get your daughter.
I know we should get back to the real discussion. So I'll let John make that segue.
Well, thank you, Jason. As I am so good at making uncomfortable segues from one topic to the next. So we're pleased to have you here, Karen. And tonight we've picked a topic, one that you actually suggested. We're not just going to be talking about your book, but our topic tonight is location, 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 the three faces of environment. And there was something else about kindergarten in there that I left out.
Or how a kindergarten classroom can be a model for an agile environment. That's
perfect, I think, because these developers, they just act like kindergartners all the time anyway, right?
Hey. Well, if they're good developers, they do, because kindergartners learn really fast. Young kids pick things up like sponges.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
Well, the other thing, too, that I think is interesting now, the other story that I have, I think I told it recently, how I had a parent-teacher conference for a 4-year-old, and we came in and we left without a goal. So, but, for early child education or even kindergarten, it's really about unstructured learning and exploratory learning, which is really one of the things that is embodied within Agile. It's the whole reason why we would have a technical spike within a sprint. So a team could go explore something And they might not create software that adds business value, but they create something that they get the power of learning, and then they can use that as they go forward.
Well, it's not as unstructured as you think, though. When you set up a early childhood environment, the environment is a huge player. And that's where a lot of the learning is generated. Just think for a minute, guys. When you walk into a kindergarten classroom, what do you see?
Colors and toys and windows and
Letters.
just everything.
The alphabet.
Everywhere.
You see things everywhere. You see things on the walls, see things everywhere. It's an environment that pulls you in. It communicates to it. It's not blank walls like a lot of these offices are. Oh, we got these beautiful walls. Maybe there's a pretty picture on it, whatever. But there are things to do. And how do you feel when you walk into a kindergarten classroom or an early childhood classroom?
I think the simple thing I would say, Karen, is that you feel engaged. I was like, wow, look at all the stuff I can do here. And instead of just walking into this environment that was kind of very, very sterile, I walked in and said it literally pulled me further into the room.
Yeah.
This is why you should have idea paint on every wall.
Yeah, good idea. Having the room, the team space where they can draw on the walls, fantastic idea. But the kindergarten classroom where it's exploratory learning, but it welcomes them, engages them, it makes them feel safe, and it tells them the third phase of the environment there is story space. They know how they're supposed to interact in that space. They have the names here, they have their job boards, they have all kinds of things. They know what they're expected to do. And that's something that's sometimes missing in the work environment. Oftentimes, a person will say, boss, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. They can't figure out what they're supposed to do. They want the boss to tell them because they make it too complicated. Sometimes we say that. Just tell me what to do, what I want to do, you want me to do, and I'll do it. But if we make the environment an active player, then they explore, like you said, Jason, and do things, and they understand things, and the environment really guides them to make the most use of what they can do with their own mind.
One thing that I noticed when my youngest is in kindergarten, actually, and when I go into her classroom, they have a carpet that has like a circle on it in the middle, and that's where everybody gathers and sits around. And I think that is a perfect thing to bring to your work areas. You definitely need a place where the team it can gather. Like a bunch of walls and cubicles that block people away from each other don't give you that. So a nice open space, not just sitting at desks facing each other and talking, but a big open space is important.
And then they have circle time, and circle time is what I call, at least in Western culture and American culture, where every school does this. I know people typically sit down, and with kids that's good because of energy, but it's like a stand-up meeting. It's literally talk about what you're doing. And I've actually been able to use the idea now that I've seen what my own kids go through in school. I've used this as a way to kind of, build the bridge between colleagues that, may have kids who know all this stuff, and then younger colleagues who don't have kids yet. And, you could say, hey, this makes sense. And as your kids grow up, you can actually explain some of the things you do at work doing Agile to your kids, and they'll understand it because it's like circle time.
It is. And the show and tell that they have once a week, that's the review.
Yeah, that's a demo. That's the demo. Exactly. So the question I'd throw out there, Karen, is, we talk about this. We start indoctrinating children with this very simple idea that emphasizes communication and exploratory learning, two of the core tenets of Agile. What goes wrong whereby we build companies, we build cubicles, and we lose that pureness that is so effective?
Ego.
Really? Like, what do you mean?
The ego of boss, the person who decides has to be in charge and has to be ordering people around. The whole control thing is what I think goes wrong. I think a big part of it, too, is when we say, okay, now you're graduated and you have this degree, therefore you can go out and you know everything you need to know. In some ways, I think we communicate to people that they're supposed to know everything and stop learning. And when you admit you don't know something, you feel like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I'm earning money and I don't know the answer to this, or I'm not doing it right. And that sets up a psychological space that is a good space. That's another, the environment. as far as I'm concerned. You have to have that psychological space where it's safe to fail, it's safe to explore. We use those words in Agile, but then we don't always walk and talk as well as we should.
But you're a professional. You can't play anymore.
Okay, so Amy, Karen and I did meet at the Agile Games Conference. So, do we want to have that debate right now? Okay, so
I don't think it's a debate. I believe that was very facetious on my part. I think that play is very important. You talked about show and tell. I don't think that show and tell just stops at the demo or with the product that your team is working on, but encourage the people on the team to have outside projects and bring them in and talk about them. Hey, every Friday at lunchtime, we're going to hang out together and talk about what side hobbies you have, what you've done. Like, tell us all about who you are in your life, because every life experience that you bring brings a new piece of knowledge to the team in order to work harder, work better, work faster.
Yeah, or even technically, a neat one that I'll throw out there, and it's actually more of a training activity, but we called it a ride-along. And this is where I was actually doing some work recently. We were talking about ways to set up a good training center to do technical training for like test-driven development and other practices. And what we were talking about is an idea where each pair is working on a workstation, but at any point in time, the instructor could almost like take the work and whatever the pair is doing and put it up like on a projection screen in front of the whole room and solicit that immediate show and tell. So, like right now, tell us, why you're refactoring that class the way you are, or why you implemented the tests of that matter. And that type of reinforcement, it helps to promote mastery, which is the way to solicit effective learning. So if you're building a training room, do something where you could let people share the screen and pop it up there on the projector real easily.
What if you did that in your war room? What if you had a screen up there that showed a workstation all the time? What if it switched every 30 minutes, just like you pair every hour, like you pair switch, and it just picks a different station and shows it up there so that, if you're getting up and walking around, you can look up there and see what some other pair is doing.
I think that's a great idea, Amos. I think the idea of big screen, and I know a while back we talked about mobbing a little bit, although I can't personally remember if we've had the mob discussion yet on this Agile Life. I forget. John shake his head no. He's our historian. So, mob programming, controversial practice. I think maybe a good compromise out of mobbing is something like that, where with very little setup, the team can immediately screen share. Everyone can come together, and instead of just having to turn around where you talk, you can actually look at some artifacts if you need to have a technical discussion and make those decisions. And then at that juncture, if you're doing that with pairs, that's awesome, and I would totally recommend that. If you aren't pairing and you have people working as individuals, it's a way to start promoting some more effective communication and collaboration.
I think it's fantastic. I want my work area with the team, if we're co-located, to look like NORAD, just with like big status screens and stuff everywhere, just because it's fun, it's engaging, there's lights and all kinds of things. And that's how I want it anyway. Big giant screens in the background. It's fun.
And that sounds like a kindergarten classroom. You have all the big giant screens, people busy doing things and sharing it all. Exactly. That's the way it should be.
With learning and with schooling, particularly with professionals, when they roll out, like you said, Karen, when they graduate from school, there's this impression that I've gotten my sheepskin. I'm moving on in my life. I'm done with the learning phase, and now I'm on to my professional execution phase. And maybe in some professions that's true, although I would say it's not, because that's really the basic laying of the basic foundation for your profession, your practice, etc. And that is really the thing that enables you to start your real journey, your real learning, is when you enter that professional community and you start learning on the job with the people that you're working with every day.
Yeah, I'll share, John. I've been having some discussions lately, and actually it was coaching, and we were talking about the technical spikes. I'll throw this out as a question for you guys. Typically what pattern that I've seen is when a project starts, they do a lot of technical spikes, kind of figure out what they're doing, test out that idea of, what technologies do we want to put in a walking skeleton. Should that idea of having a technical spike continue throughout a project, or should it taper off?
You mean the ability to have technical spikes throughout the project?
No, I would say so if you're looking at metrics, just kind of looking at team behavior, is it a problem if a team stops having spikes once they, kind of have a few sprints under their belt and they kind of figure out what they're doing?
If they stop having them?
Yeah, knowing that are they forfeiting the opportunity for additional learning?
I think so. I will often I've kind of been shot down about this by some guys on the podcast before. Is I'm a big fan of hour-long pair switching, and I also like to be at a commit point at that juncture. So at the hour-long pair switching point, I take everything that is not committed, doesn't have tests, and I just roll back. That way I'm only throwing away an hour, and now I move forward with a lot more knowledge.
Yeah, I remember just working with, again, talking about training and such. I mean, training is one type of activity you can do to promote learning. And obviously, if you go to training, some courses are better than others. Some courses are more relevant than others. But the beauty of the spike is it's relevant to the context of a team. So you shouldn't be using some type of fictitious example. You should be trying to follow and align to whatever your project and the technology is. Trying to figure that out. So everything you learn is nearly 100% relevant for the problem you're trying to solve. Most training classes can't do that. But the pattern I've noticed is just you start a project, you kind of have that allocation of some time for learning, some time for story development. Project goes on, you get to the third or fourth release, and if you look at the story backlog, most teams, I see teams that don't have a lot of spikes, some that have none, and I question at that if their opportunity for learning is being missed by not having a retrospective and reflecting and trying to say, hey, listen, here's something as a team we need to learn. Let's do a spike on that in the next sprint, and then see if it can help us improve what we do. And you should do that throughout a project.
But don't you think they're learning when they're doing the actual development work and they're getting it done? There's learning happening with that as well. It's not just during a spike they learn. They learn in the day-to-day work.
Yeah, I agree totally with that, Karen. So that's where this was just a discussion I've been having with a few colleagues, and it's just come up naturally. And the question is it needed? And if a team takes an opportunity to say, we're going to, kind of like Amos said, we're going to have a timeout and allocate a small portion of our time that we're working on the project to do something where we are going to deliberately learn something. Would that help us improve? And if we take that discipline and apply it throughout the life cycle of a project, does that enable us to write better quality software as a team?
You know what I think you might be alluding to here, Jason, to take it back to the three phases that Karen mentioned: shared space, safe space, and story space. What I would be concerned about with the lack of spikes occurring is something that would maybe fit under the safe space area, where has trust been lost to where the team no longer feels that it's okay, that it's safe for them to fail, that it's safe for them to take a chance, take a risk, try to learn something new in the context of having a safe space and this thing called a spike, to which they could spend time learning, possibly fail, and then move on.
Yeah, no, I agree totally, John. I mean, to me, I look at this from my background for this is I believe it's from Lean and this idea of Kaizen, and we're always working to improve. And so we should be doing deliberate things to do that. And I think some teams might say, you know what, we've got our architecture. All we're doing is building on top of it. We're adding new user stories to add additional business functionality. That architecture is good enough. Let's just leave it. And I think if teams become complacent like that, either because they don't feel trusted to ask to do that research, then that's just wasteful. I mean, who knows what opportunities for learning and for improvement are being missed?
And then back to Karen's point, I think that it is accurate that teams are still continuously learning as they're going through the cycle of development. There could be times where a team has reached a point where they have learned as much as they're going to learn about maybe the domain or the architectural components, and some of the official spiking is in the past and they don't need to do that anymore. But hopefully there's learning that's constantly going on just through the interactions of the team and exploring new stories and work to be done.
And I think you... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
But I think Jason brings up a good point, and that is that we get so caught up in just doing what we're doing that we sometimes forget that there are other opportunities. That's what I think I'm hearing you say the technical spice is. It's another opportunity for them to explore where they could be, and that we might have to sometimes shake them up with that and say we are going to make a conscious effort to put it in, sort of like they did the FedEx days or what we do with a retrospective, a conscious time. So when we haven't done something for a while, let's add a little risk, a little spice to what's going on and see what comes out of it.
And I think that there's a lot of learning that happens as you go along, but just because you learn something and you recognize something in your product doesn't mean that you apply what you learned right away, because you have deadlines and you are freaked out and you don't have time. Where if you give them that safe space to explore a little bit and the time in order to do that, then they can try to apply those things that they've recognized that they're learning along the way. And then, that takes that learning and solidifies it in the head too.
As
I'd like to maybe...
you forget things. You forget what you say, oh yeah, I learned that a while ago, but I've forgotten it because I haven't had a chance to exercise it. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit there about the safe space. What about some more stuff about the shared space? So Karen, you have in the notes here that it's the manifest thoughts in the real world. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you see the shared space?
Oh yeah. Give you an example. I was with a client and they were talking about moving the development team from where they were because they were growing. They couldn't stay where they were. And the question was, were they going to put them in a war room down the end of the hall, or were they going to put them windowless war room, down the end of the hall, way down the end of the hall, windowless and all of that? Or were they going to put them in a bunch of cubicles right outside the product owner's office in the middle of the call center? And everybody wanted to be in cubicles because you had windows and it was close to the product owner and all of that. And I was saying, guys, I think you're missing the boat. If you're in this war room, you're going to have walls that you can write on. You can all be together. But if you're in the cubicles, you're going to have the call center and the human resources and the bosses all around you. Oh, no, you don't want to put them in that space. You want to be in the nice space with the windows. Oh, I can appreciate that. I'm human. I like windows. But when they moved into that space, there were 4 in a pod and then 2 in another pod and 2 in another pod nearby. They were very close to each other. But they were spending all their time on chat, sending each other chats. You look over and you see them. They're all sitting really close together. They look like they're working and everything. But I can see the chats, and they're joking and whatever, and there's all this chatting going around. I can't help but think that if they were in that war room, a lot more work would have been getting on because it would have been a more conducive space to what they needed to be doing.
And wouldn't it have been a better interactions and probably a richer interaction even if they were joking, if they would have been maybe joking in person or speaking about the project in person? If I'm having an instant messaging chatting session with you, there's no possibility that anyone else could hear us other than maybe, with Jason and Amos's loud keyboards, they could hear clickety, 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 clickety. But they
absolutely.
certainly.
And then if somebody joins in, it's just synchronous, and you're trying to read back, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. All the wasted time waiting for the months to come back and everything. So I think the shared space is very important in a way different than we often think. Because remember, the folks, the developers and management and everyone that kept saying, this is the better space because of our image of what a nice space is. But it really wasn't the best space for the work that they needed to do.
I do a lot of remote work recently, especially in the past year. And I find that I try to mimic that being there, and I avoid the text chat. I will bring up Skype or Google Hangouts or some other tool that allows me to have a voice and hopefully face-to-face conversation with somebody. And it does make a big difference. There's a lot of emotional context that you can't get from text. No matter how many smiley faces or frowning faces somebody puts in there, it's not the same.
It's amazing. I was working, I was an Agile coach in a team where we had a bunch of people in one location in India, and then we had a handful of people here Boston area. And we're having all these conference calls. They had a video chat suite set up and everything, and great big screens, gorgeous. I said, why aren't we using that? Well, nobody ever had. So I got it all set up, went to use it for the first time. And I mean, we had a wall, like being in a huge theater, and we had the whole team there. It was amazing. I was trying to see somebody sitting behind somebody else in there, and I found myself actually leaning to try to look around the person on the screen. But we had those uncomfortable silences on the phone before, and people would say, what are they doing? They're not talking. Well, we had the silences when we saw them on the screen. We could see they were consulting with each other, and they were typing, and they were looking things up. So it just made everything so much more real. Even the silences weren't silent. We had the screen to see what was actually happening.
Yeah, and we're actually being relatively tame tonight here on the podcast, because I know in the past we've used charades in all types of ways, hand raising. Yeah, we're interesting. But I mean, what I wanted to add to that is, we're saying, and someone asked me recently, they're like, they said, Jason, what is, if there was one thing that you would, one high level thing, so that was most important, to help teams and really organizations be successful with Agile, what is it? And it's all about communication. I mean, all we're doing here is taking, what at one point where people, if anything, created institutionalized processes to, if anything, inhibit communication. So heaven forbid we actually talk to each other about what we need to do. We're going to write it down in documents that are thousands of pages long, and then we're going to give that document to someone else, and then we're going to think they'll read it and they can edit it. But why not just talk to the person? And I know it seems strange, and I know when I teach Agile courses, I deliberately do a lot of activities that force people to communicate, and it's interesting to see how people react, because they're like, "Come on, we want to do technical stuff." No, if we don't have that foundation of communication in place, especially in a coaching session, you're not infusing that into people, then they may think that, okay, I can work around the need to communicate with documentation or with technology. And the sorry thing is, you can't. You have to work with that. You have to talk.
Software development is not a technical problem. It's a people problem. And there are so many developers, especially coming straight out of school, that don't realize that. They think they're going to go in and I know everything about a computer, and I'm going to be able to do this, and I'm going to be awesome at it and amazing. And then they get out there and realize, holy cow, I have to talk to people. I have to be social. I have to bathe. What is going on?
You have to exercise your kindergarten skills. You have
right.
to know how to talk politely and take turns and share and collaborate. And you find out that when you're playing in the block corner, it's a lot more fun when the group of you guys get together and you decide what you're going to do and you talk about it and you work together. It's a lot more fun than when you do it by yourself.
Well, and maybe, to bring the kindergarten thing up again, and just anyone who has kids knows this, and if you don't have kids, if you see people with kids, or when you have kids one day, you'll experience this, is that something that kids do very well that helps on a team is kids don't know how to filter. Because, that's a pretty advanced thing your brain develops later in life. Some of it is through natural behavior. Some of it is through learned behavior. And because of that, kids are honest. They're open. They're transparent. They'll say anything. My 4-year-old, we go out shopping before the holidays. She comes back, tells my wife everything we bought. I'm like, okay, Christmas surprise is ruined. Thank you. But that, because they don't know that. Imagine a team did that. Because teams put silos up. They don't want to talk. People avoid people.
It worked with me. I don't have a filter.
No, Amos, you don't have a filter, and I
You're
don't
an
have
alien.
one either. So I think if you do an Agile podcast like this, you probably don't have a filter. So,
That's right.
So, and again, look, guys, for all of our listeners out there, we're doing this. Obviously, be respectful. If you're in the United States, remember there are certain laws that cannot be broken, so that is a tough thing. But so don't get yourself fired. But do an experiment. Turn your filter off. And understand you got to give some. If you give some, you got to be willing to take some. So maybe you give someone some feedback. Guess what? You might get some right back in your face, But understand if you do that, it can help a team improve because you can put that behind you and you can move forward.
If you remove the filter, you usually have more honest and immediate feedback too, which is another thing that you get in a kindergarten class. Is that when you're in kindergarten and you're young, you do something good, the teacher immediately says, "Hey, great job." And they give you immediate feedback. And then as we get older and we get into college and you finish that test, and then the teacher gets around to grading it a month later, maybe, and sometimes they don't hand it back. You just find out at the end of the semester what you got. We lengthen that feedback cycle, and a lot of Agilists try to bring it back down to that immediate, "Hey, good job," or "Hey, you messed up. Let's figure this out."
See, Amos, what I want to ask you is, or Karen, I'm sure you probably know the answer to this question, but what's unique about that feedback that you get in kindergarten? What makes it more effective?
What makes it more effective is, we know that a person needs 5 positive pieces of feedback to counteract 1 negative piece of feedback. But in the real life world, you always think, "I've got some feedback for you." It's never good. in kindergarten, with little kids, it's, "Oh, what a wonderful job you did. And what is this word? Oh, my goodness, that word is pirate. I see that. That's very good. Here's the standard spelling for pirate. You can try using this spelling, too, sometime." Rather than, telling them it's all wrong, you say good things. You make them feel good.
Yeah.
This is something that we need to learn. We need to be able to say, "I recognize you for who you are." I've had wonderful experiences as a coach when I say to things, somebody's like, "Gee, I really appreciate your forthrightness. I know I can always depend on you for that." And the person just opens up because they're uncomfortable being forthright half the time. They know they're sticking their neck out. And they get some positive feedback for that. They feel wonderful. They tell me more things. I found out more things. I have reinforced that positive behavior. Don't get that so much in the real world.
And what I was going to add to that, based upon what Amos said, Karen, and you echoed exactly, is all of that feedback. It's fostering intrinsic motivation. So, and for kids, guess what? There's nothing else you can do. So, when you have a kid in kindergarten or you're in early childhood education, the teacher can't give them a grade because they don't understand what it is. And so they have to do other things that are natural recognition patterns or natural reinforcement patterns. And that truly motivates you. Then, of course, go to the ego thing later on in life. We create systems, we do grades, we do, points, performance evaluations. And we start to give feedback where we bring the extrinsic factors into it, and they're just not as effective. Go ahead, Amos.
I was going to discuss one way to give effective feedback that I've had amazing success with people is that we live in a world of sound bites and technology and emails, and everybody's in a hurry, and you just go by and you say, "Hey, good work today," and you walk away. Sit down and handwrite somebody a note sometime and to tell them thank you, and just leave it on their desk. You'll find out, you'll be at the Christmas party for work, and somebody's spouse will come up to you and be like, "Hey, I don't know what you did, but you gave him or her this letter, and now it's in a frame sitting on their desk at home." and those people you can make people do complete 180s on a team and become the most effective person on the team by taking the time to actually handwrite a note.
It's funny, Amos. We had recently in a retrospective had someone give some feedback that we had a culture that wasn't the norm to say thank you and to thank people publicly. And quite the opposite was actually true. So when some people tried to give thanks, they were often shot down or shut down before they could really do that. And then we decided that we were going to actually implement a policy on the team where not a policy, just a practice that we decided to do, where we would get these thank you notes. And if you wanted to say thank you to somebody, we encouraged you to do that and write them a little note. And it's just a little fancy sticky note that you hand to the person or stick on their computer. And I think it's made a change.
See, back around Thanksgiving, it's funny. This happened today, actually. I did an activity. It was right after the Deep Agile conference that Agile New England did. So I did this Agile Thanksgiving experiment that a few teams at a company, at the company I worked for, they did it. And where you like put your team names up there, then people just kind of go it's like a buffet. You write ideas up there. So we're reorganizing because we got some new projects up this week, and we found the Agile Thanksgiving poster. And what's funny, so someone threw it over and they gave it to me, and they're like, "Here, Jason, have this." So I took it and I took it back to the area where I have a bunch of stuff just laying there in a big mess, basically. And what's funny is two people from that team, they actually came over and they took the Post-it notes that people wrote about them by hand, and they took them and they said, "Can they keep them?" And they did that. And I don't know where they went. They took them back to whatever project they're working on now. But this idea of providing that feedback, writing it down so it has staying power. Because a lot of times in a retro, there's lots of great kudos, but the thing is, people leave the retro, the next day there's a crisis, and everyone forgets all. It's very easy to forget all of that good, positive energy.
Guys, they put those sticky notes in a frame on their desk at home. Told you.
Yeah, whatever. I'm just saying, but there's a way to do it, and it's proof that is effective. I mean, we did an activity. It was in a team area. When that team was decommissioned, we were just cleaning up, and someone said, "Hey, I want those because they meant something and they had a positive impact on that person." And so, that's awesome. And we need, again, these are all these communication and human factors things. We need more of that in teams, pretty much everywhere.
Absolutely. Back when I was a business manager, I had a team, and it was a hard job. And I started writing things and posting them where they would come in and sign in for it was the second shift type job. And quote of the night, so-and-so said this and whatever, or congratulations, and she made this many calls, or wonderful conversion rate, Joe, and whatever. And I was just posting these things, something different, almost every night up there. And at first, people were just kind of looking at it, not saying anything. And then they started complimenting each other and said, "Wow, that was great, Joe, you did that. That was great, Kathy, you did that." And they started having conversations around it. And several of them told me, said, "I find myself when I'm approaching work, walking a little faster because I put up." It was great. It was just a great team building thing. And it was just a little something that was publicly said about somebody that was really good.
Isn't that amazing? Because what did that cost the company? It cost the company virtually nothing. You used materials that you already had there. You didn't have to go out and buy everybody fancy shirts or coffee cups or $50 gift cards to Starbucks. It was writing something down and authentically telling someone thank you.
Yeah. And a great little teaming activity. I mean, this is more of a team builder, and by no means is this an Agile practice. Actually, I believe there's a Toastmasters game. I forget the name of it that does this. But it's where you use a time box, and you pair up, and you give someone who you work with and you have a connection to, you give them positive feedback for a few minutes. And, it's tough. It's tough to look someone in the eye face to face and really, give, if anything, just give them feedback. It could be positive, it could be constructive, but maintain that dialogue and for a prolonged period of time, a lot longer than many people feel comfortable doing so. So maybe do the clock for 2 or 3 minutes and see what happens.
Isn't it amazing that in the span of the history of humanity, humanity has had more time where we haven't had a written form of communication than the time that we have had written communication. And so much stuff was communicated by face-to-face conversation, by word of mouth, including things like sharing the history and learnings. And all of a sudden, as soon as we find, the ability to scratch little marks onto cuneiform tablets, all of a sudden we all we all clamped down and stopped talking to each other, and now we just want to write things down and leave it at that.
Agile Factor's gonna debate that a little bit, John.
Here comes the Agile Factor, Karen. Watch out.
All right.
Agile Factor's gonna debate. I don't know if I agree that I think we have had how do you account, John, for the idea of drawing pictures in that statement you just made?
Don't try and argue with my history.
Well, what I want to say is I think that sometimes we overcomplicate communication using language. One of my strongest mentors in the last few years had a policy that everything I presented to him when I was working kind of as a consultant, I had to do it in a pictorial manner. So if I put something together and it had words, I literally was told to redo it. And this was actually in the military domain, so it was like okay, fail, go do it again. You don't do that. Amos is like, so I was forced to learn how to communicate in pictures.
So what I heard you say is that in the military they can't read.
Well, and Amos
John.
Amos was in the service. This involved
13
the Marine
years, John.
This involved the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is freaking awesome at what they do. Okay, so but anyways, we needed to have pictures. Okay,
send your hate mail to john.sextro john.sextro@gmail.com.
Anyways, the story goes: the power to communicate in pictures is something I think we are not taking full advantage of. We just earlier today we were having a discussion about how a team could go through a chartering exercise, and yes, you could go through a chartering exercise. You could write a big document. You could fill it out. You could try to maintain it. What if you just drew a picture? What does your team look like? Draw a picture of your working agreements, figure out what it means and maintain that. It's a different way to communicate. It takes less time to do it. And from my own mentoring and things that I was challenged to learn and how I evolved, I would think it's actually in some instances, it allows for more effective communication.
A lot of retrospective games are that way.
Well, that's a
picture.
Well, that's intentional. But the problem is if you look at teams, I only see them drawing pictures and using pictures in their retrospectives. So let's do that for other team activities other than a retro.
And ER diagrams don't count.
This is one of the things I really like about Agile, too, because you're talking about evolution. The rational part of our brain where we make decisions, where we use a lot of language, is a very small part of our brain. The bulk of our brain is visual, motor, and auditory. We know things at a glance. We need to do things to understand it. Once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you never forget. None of this stuff has to do with language or whatever. It's the whole other part of our brain that is really underutilized in businesses. And that's where the pictures come in. And you were talking before, positions, whatever. I think one of the things I like about Agile, about the filters, is if you say to somebody, okay, fist of 5, what do you want, folks? Right now, 1, 2, 3, fist of 5. Fingers go up, and they will tell you much more truthfully without a filter if they have to use their hand to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 than if you ask them their opinion, because it's scary to to speak up and perhaps be on the other side of somebody with power in a room. But with a fist of 5 or a Roman vote, much easier.
We recently were introducing the practice of the fist of 5, and I thought that the practice in and of itself for this group would initially be a little scary as well. So I actually had everyone, for the very first time that we did Fist of 5, you had to not only hold up your fingers, but you had to cover your eyes. So you would not be tempted to wait and look at what someone else had put up before you put them up. So this would challenge everyone to be completely transparent. And I would like to point out that the Agile Factor did make some excellent points there about the drawings and pictures and how those are a very good form of communication. So I just want to.
Picture is worth 1,000 words. So
they tell me.
So that tells me when Cutter says I can write a 3,000 word article, all I have to do is draw 3 pictures and I'm done.
and I said a whiteboard is worth a 100-page specification document.
Yes.
You heard it here from Karen.
Roman boat? Is that the
Roman
same thing?
boat.
Roman boat. Okay.
Roman
Now you said
boat.
boat. I'm like frantically looking it up.
No, a Roman boat. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
So we may be at a good segue point here. We're at about 40 minutes in the conversation. Maybe we should go ahead and do the picks or ask Karen here if are there any other points before we wrap up, Karen, that you want to get in?
Now, just to reiterate, to kind of conversation flow, that you did state it very well once, John, the three parts of three-phase environment, as far as I'm concerned, is making sure you have the physical space set up well, and that just doesn't include whether the team is in a war room or cubicles or what that's like, but also space that they're working in, because that's a very physical environment for them too. You have to make sure that those environments are working smoothly for continuous integration and deployment if you want things to work. The psychological safe space where they know that they can be engaged and it's okay to risk and fail. And the process space, the story space, they know where they belong in it, what their personal narrative is, so that they understand how to really be pulled in and engaged, like you do in the kindergarten room. And as far as my top picks, you want to hear my top picks?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do our picks. But before we do, Karen, I wanted to ask you something. I wanted to ask you if, when you're doing your consulting and going around and talking to people, if you actually suggest or bring up the topic of kindergarten from the perspective of how to maybe organize a room, or using that as a metaphor for how to decorate the room or how to put information and share information in the room.
Never as much as I'm doing it on this podcast. Never as much as I'm doing it on this podcast. Some people respond to it very well. Other people, I feel my way a little bit in it. I don't want to go too far out on the limb, scare them.
Yeah, and Karen, I agree with that. But it's funny, and I know last time I was on an episode of This Agile Life, one of my picks was talking about Richard Sheridan's book that came out December 26, 2013, with Joy Inc., which is the book about Menlo Innovations and their culture and how they did that to create an environment. Having now read the book, and it's a really good book, it talks about that openness. Doesn't quite go so far as to call it a kindergarten classroom, but if you know what's in a kindergarten classroom and you read that book, you can make the connection. Yeah. So that might just be another metaphor that I think another story to tell that could be in a coach's arsenal. Actually, as a coach, as well as if you're a change agent or a change artist, as Esther Derby says, a way to help those who may not be able to relate, give them a scenario that they can relate to, so they can see the value and impact.
And that's really the core of all learning, which you learn in psychology and in this theory of learning. And that is, you have to take the person where they are, whether they're 4 years old. You have to start where they are and build on what they know, so that they can get to the next step. You can't just make the big jump. You have to do it in stages.
Well, it has been wonderful, Karen, to speak with you tonight about location and about the three faces of environment and how that relates to all the things that we can possibly learn and extract from the kindergarten classroom. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
All right, now we can go and do our picks. And of course, we'll give our special guest, Karen, the first opportunity to give us her picks tonight.
Thank you. I have two picks. Of course, I like my book, the Agile ABC book. But I also want to put a pick out there for Innovation Games. They have a wonderful set of games. As a matter of fact, I'm going to one of their workshops this week that help businesses to set up their environment so that they get work done collaboratively. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for anybody who isn't familiar with that to check out Innovation Games.
Excellent. And
so you're endorsing the Innovation Games company, knowing there's the Innovation Games book and there's the Innovation Games that are all over there. And so it's a whole enterprise. It's an enterprise, Amos.
It's an enterprise.
It is.
It's an enterprise of innovation games.
All about environment. All about environment.
I think I threw up in my throat a little bit when you said enterprise.
All I can say is all I can say is, guess what? Thank you to Luke for making Luke Holman behind the mastermind behind Innovation Games, for making an enterprise that's good, Amos. And you know what? I think if companies want to set up an Innovation Games Center of Excellence, that is a center of excellence that will be good.
Well, it's been a long time since the evil enterprise architect came out. It's nice to see him again.
Oh, he's back.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, I'll go next, man. How about that?
You got it, Jason.
I have two. I was crowdsourcing these. First is kind of interesting. I'm going to probably get razzed here by Amos because it is vendor affiliated. But our friends over at Atlassian, or at Atlassian, the guys that make Jira, they have an interesting series of very entertaining short videos they've made called "How Not to Do Agile." They've created this guy named Chet Wrong, I forget. He's the world's worst Agile coach. And they poke a little bit of fun at things like stand-ups, requirements documents, retrospectives. But in some instances, there's value because you could say, this is not what we should be doing. And if you happen to watch these videos and you see some things that they might poke a little bit of fun at, but you know that maybe you have some challenges internally, it's an interesting way to have a conversation. And if you understand a lot about Agile, I think you'll laugh. So check that out. We'll be sure to put they actually have a YouTube channel for it. We'll put the link to the YouTube channel in the show notes. And the other one that I want to just plug is Agile New England. I think I've mentioned them before. That's the Agile users group in the Boston, Massachusetts area. It's how I met Karen. They do great programming. For those of you that are in the Midwest, the St. Louis area, since we have a lot of listeners there, because that's where this Agile Life is based out of physically, it's only about a 3-hour flight to Boston. It's a lot of fun to head up there. So you should check it out sometime if you want to. They got a baseball team up there. We can discuss that. Baseball team's got a really old ballpark that they should tear down and build.
It's kind of nasty, yeah.
Yeah. So, so there are lots of reasons to go to Boston. Agile New England and the great things they do up there is definitely one of them.
Baseball is not.
You can check them out online. They got a website and they got lots of stuff that they have events planned going throughout the 2014 year that are open to anyone who's interested.
And they have New England clam chowder.
And the North End and stuff. And when they have a conference, they have it at MIT at a $1 billion facility from Microsoft, which is really cool. So,
all right, let's see what Amos's picks are tonight.
All right, so for Nate Mackey, Nate got a pick one time called Candy Box, and it's a little text game in a browser. And I'm not a gamer, but then I had to try to hack the JavaScript. And so Candy Box 2 just came out, candybox2.net. I might have been out for a little while. I just found out about it. But thanks to our host, Nate Mackey, for turning me on to Candy Box originally and wasting hours of my life.
So instead of doing open source software, you're playing Candy Box 2.net.
Well, I'm still doing it's JavaScript in the browser, and I'm trying to break it.
I see.
I'm too impatient to actually play a game to the end. And then my other pick is a little book that you can buy, or it's actually available for free on LeanPub and somewhere else. I don't remember, but we'll put a link in the show notes. Called Getting Value Out of Agile Retrospectives. It's by Ben Lenders, and I'm totally going to mess up this other name. Luis Goncalves. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce that. I wish I did. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. It's a little book. I read it in one night when I had a baby that was not going to sleep very well. And it was a pretty good book. It's got some exercises for retrospectives and when to use them. It's kind of like a recipe book for retrospective games, like a pocket book, really. So it's a nice little read.
Hey, Gene Lewis, you have an opportunity to come on This Agile Life and tell Amos he's wrong.
So funny you should say that,
wrong
Jason.
About what?
His pronouncing his name.
Oh yeah. Just have him come do that.
It's funny you should say that because they're our next guests coming up very soon.
Oh, so are we going to use this book for? And we should have done Karen's book, but I didn't know about it early enough. We need to start book club episodes once in a while.
Absolutely.
Where we all read the book and then discuss it.
We'll work on that.
Come back and have Karen again. Karen, would you come back and discuss your book with us?
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to.
Well, I'm writing that down. She committed. She will come back. Okay. Written down. I wrote it down right here.
Guys, just take a 5-minute break. We can do this right now. Let's just do it. It's a very short book. And guess what? It's highly effective. Karen is an author. You wrote a short book and it's highly effective. More.
Thank you.
And I'm going to use that quote right there. As Karen can write a short and effective book, our stories should be able to be short and effective.
What it lacks in words, it makes up for in pictures, which we know are worth 1,000 words.
That's right.
Okay.
So tell the analyst groups that like to give you a word count to write to.
There are words in it, folks. There really are words in it. Don't let it make you think it's just a picture book.
No.
She showed us earlier.
It's
got
true.
Quite a few words. I'm pretty excited to read it.
As am I.
And most importantly, Karen, just to confirm, it's in print, which is what I have, but it is now an ebook or it's in electronic also.
Yes, you can get it on the iBook store, or you can get it in Kindle Fire format on Amazon. But I still have a big pile of them here at home. An awesome paperback, and I can get discounts.
The other thing, too, that I'll say, guess what? If it's on Kindle stuff, instant PowerPoint.
I don't think you should pirate her works.
Not pirate. You can just present it. It's awesome.
You have to annotate. You have to use the appropriate footnoting annotations.
My wife is a high school English teacher. She will tear me up about.
I want to know how John got from me talking about PowerPoint to piracy.
I don't know.
That could be the next episode.
All right, I'm going to get my pick in here before we go completely off the rails. So I have a productivity tip. Occasionally we give productivity tips on the show. Amos has recommended
this is the first one that I know of, at least that we've called a productivity tip.
Well, I think it's the best practice.
I thought we just wasted an hour of everybody's time listening to it, but let's go for it.
I don't even know if I want to give it now. Jeez. Yeah. All right, here comes my productivity tip. So it's called 50-20-50, and it's kind of like Pomodoro. So that was a technique that Amos recommended previously. As Jason said, I'm the historian for the show, so I remember these things. And the 50-20-50 technique is great if you need some time to focus on something. So the concept is you take 50 minutes, you shut everything off, turn off your phone, shut down your email, shut down Twitter, shut down whatever it is that would commonly distract you, go into some sort of full screen focus mode on what you're working on. Work on that thing for 50 minutes. And then give yourself a treat, give yourself a break, take 20 minutes, do something else. Completely unrelated, non-work related. Go walk the dog or walk on the stair climber for 20 minutes. Give yourself an outlet. Take a break. Come back.
Like Candy Box 2.
Candy Box 2. Good choice. Always a good choice. Go do that. Come back. Right back in. Another 50 minutes. Super focus mode. Shut everything off. And at the end of that, that's a 2-hour window of time. And it's a great way if you're a creative type, if you're an author, if you're a software developer, if you work by yourself, if you pair program, this is something you could use with pair programming, but it gives you a time and an opportunity to hyper focus, relax, let the creative juices kind of collect and flow, and then come back in and go hyper focus again. And it's something I've been trying to do with some of the work that I do on the side and whatnot, and it's been very effective. So I thought I would share it with you all tonight here on This Agile Life.
I would love for some project managers to give us their thoughts on that.
No, we don't like project managers.
Well, I think they might have a different viewpoint. And what's funny, John, because again, what you talked about is how our bodies are made. Your brain needs a break. So, and if you take a break, your brain just works better. And sometimes we're quick to think about that. And although we might be programming a state machine or a computer, it can work forever until the battery dies. Your brain's a little bit more complicated. We'll leave it at that.
And even the body, Jason, I read not that long ago that if you sit for an hour or more without moving on a routine basis, your risk of heart disease goes up. But if you just get up and walk a minute or two every hour, your risk of heart disease goes down.
It's amazing. We could go on forever. We could go on all night talking about this stuff. Unfortunately, this medium just doesn't allow for that. And we'd like to continue this conversation with you. So join us in our private Google Plus community. You can interact with the hosts of the show. We're going to send Karen a special invitation to join us in our Google Plus community, so you'll be able to find Karen out there in our community, maybe. And you can go out there and join our community from our website by clicking the Join the Community logo right there, big orange Join the Community logo. Check it out and join us.
And you get a free hug from Amos if he ever sees you in public.
That's the best part. Okay, everyone, that's all we have time for tonight. I'd like to thank each of my co-hosts for being here tonight. We'll start with Jason Tice. Jason, where can folks find you out on the internet?
People can find me at www.theagilefactor.com or on Twitter at theagilefactor.
And Amos King, where can folks find you?
You can find my ugly blog at dirtyinformation.com, or you can find me on GitHub or Twitter at ADKRON. And now no longer am I ever allowed to make my blog look good because it being the ugly blog has become a thing.
I think that's a way to sell it. Karen Favaza Spencer, where can people find you out there on the internet?
So you can find me at agilekindergarten.com, or you can find me on Twitter at agilekinder, and you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Karen, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for putting up with all of our antics here tonight. It has been a wonderful conversation, and I have certainly learned quite a bit from you.
Well, thank you. I've learned from you gentlemen, too. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And we'll hold you to the coming back thing.
Anytime.
Great. All right, everyone. Be sure to check out our website at thisagilelife.com for the show notes for this podcast and all of our past 31 episodes. Thanks for listening, and keep living this agile life.